Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Superheroes, Movies, and Superhero Movies. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzel.
And today we're talking about Bill and Ted Face the Music. But before we get into that, I just wanted to say, this is obviously our first episode in a very long time. And one of the things we've been doing now to kind of mix it up is we've been recording video. So this video will be on YouTube. It will obviously still be on the podcast app, which is, I'm sure, how you're listening to it now, or however you're listening to your podcast, whether it be the Apple Podcast or Stitcher or whatever. But if you want to watch us talk about this film, you can. And the link will be in the description, the liner notes, or whatever you want to call it, of this episode. And we, from here on out, I think we'll be recording video and posting the video of the episode to YouTube. So however you want to watch, listen, or whatever to us, I just want to put that out there and let you know that we are doing that now. And also apologize for the fact that it has been so long since we've done an episode. We're mixing things up a little bit, and we're doing it a little differently. We're recording our episodes early, kind of stockpiling, so that way, hopefully, we won't have these periods of time where we don't upload episodes. We're trying to be consistent this time going forward. So we've already got a few episodes in the can. So hopefully we can continue that and keep putting up episodes every 2 weeks for your listening enjoyment, or now viewing enjoyment if you want to watch it on YouTube. So with that being said, we're going to jump right into the movie. This movie was released this past Friday, actually. Well, when this episode...
Yeah, 2 days ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, when this episode airs, it'll be about a week ago, but...
True.
It was released in 2020, obviously, directed by Dean Parisot? I should really probably figure out how to pronounce some of these names before we start recording. Written by Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon, and starring Keanu Reeves, Alex Winter, Kristen Schaal, Samara Weaving, Bridget Lundy-Payne, William Sadler, Anthony Kerrigan, Aaron Hayes, Jamie Mays, Hal Landon Jr., Beck Bennett, Kid Cudi, and a few other people. This is obviously the third film in the Bill and Ted trilogy, and released 31 years after the original Bill and Ted film. And
to the day?
No, I don't think so. Actually, I don't know. I don't know when Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was released. But 31 years to the year. Because the first one came out in 89, and then the second one came out in 91. And now we've got this one in 2020. And this is honestly a movie that I never expected to actually be able to watch.
I agree. Well, I mean, I didn't have, really a attachment to Bill and Ted until we did our episodes.
Yeah.
And doing those episodes... that's when I learned that they were doing a third one. And so, but that was a big surprise because, one, it's Keanu Reeves. Why would he do Bill and Ted 3 at this point?
Right.
And it had been so long. So, yeah, when we were talking about it coming out, I was pretty excited.
I was super excited. I mean, I've been hearing rumors about Bill and Ted 3 for years. And... it was a few years ago when Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter, they were at the Hollywood Bowl. There was a video of them announcing that Bill and Ted 3 was happening. And it's even with that video announcement, I still was skeptical of ever actually getting to see the movie. It's one of those things where, it's like this upcoming Flash movie with Michael Keaton as Batman and Ben Affleck as Batman. It's like, until they start rolling in front of the camera, I don't believe that. I certainly hope that this movie will happen, but it's one of those things that I'm trying not to get my hopes up too much, and that's how I was about Bill and Ted 3. It was just I loved Bill and Ted. You were not, maybe you had seen the first one, right? But you hadn't seen the second one before we did the episodes,
right? And I had seen the first one a long time ago on TBS or something,
right? And I'd say, I watched the first one so many times growing up. And I watched the animated show when it was on TV, not religiously or anything. I don't really remember a whole lot about the animated show. But I was a big Bill and Ted fan. I loved Keanu Reeves from the movie. Ted was my favorite character. I wanted to be Ted, even though he's kind of they're both kind of like airhead-ish type characters. But I loved Keanu Reeves in the movie. I really wanted to be Ted. And it's, I was actually talking to my brother about this because my brother came over to watch the movie with me the other day. And my brother was saying, Keanu Reeves gets a bad rap for being gets a bad rap for being like a not good actor, a bad actor. But you think about it, and it's mostly because of Bill and Ted. Like, when I think a lot of times people think about Keanu Reeves and they think about the Ted character, and they almost kind of associate that with Keanu Reeves. I could be guessing here, but you watch the film, this new movie, and you realize that he's able to kind of get back into that Ted role, and he like plays it really well.
Yeah.
And so
I don't think it's so much that he has the bad rep because of. I think it was. He had Speed, and The Matrix, and it's almost just like he has just this dead emotion in those movies. I
mean, I disagree.
That's where
I think what it is it's his. He's. I can't remember if he's from Hawaii or if he like grew up in Hawaii or something, but he kind of has that surfer affect, and it's exaggerated in the Ted character, but he's kind of got that a little bit. Like, that's why he's perfect for Ted, essentially. And I think it's just that affect that he gives off that some people think makes him not suitable for certain films. But the reason I brought this up is because I loved Bill and Ted. I watched Bill and Ted a bunch, and I know my dad had seen Bill and Ted with me, and obviously didn't really think much of the film, but loved Speed when it came out. And I remember telling him that Keanu Reeves was Ted in Bill and Ted, and my dad was blown away by it. He did not realize when he went and saw Speed that that character was, or that actor was the same actor that played Ted in Bill and Ted. And I thought that was, I just remembered being that kind of thinking that was funny.
Oh yeah, totally.
So
in fact, I did that with my daughter.
Oh really?
Because she put in The Matrix like 2 nights ago, and she had watched the first 2 Bill and Ted's with me, and I was like, that's Ted, right?
What? Yeah. I mean, that's how my dad was. I think I can't remember how I brought it up, but I remember saying like that. He's Ted in Bill and Ted. And my dad was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, it was, So I think watching those 2 movies, at least back to back, you realize he's got a pretty decent range as an actor. Now, there's certain movies where he's not necessarily the best actor. Like the one movie that kind of comes to mind for me is Bram Stoker's Dracula. And I think that's really just Keanu Reeves.
I forgot about that one.
Keanu Reeves is not necessarily the best at doing British accents, which is also evident in this film.
Right.
But aside from that, like I really consider myself a Keanu Reeves fan. I really like Keanu Reeves, and he's.
I was gonna say, so I do agree with what I've heard about, like I was saying, kind of the dead emotion. In Speed, The Matrix, he's and I forgot about Dracula. And maybe even a little bit in John Wick, but I've only seen the first one.
Oh man, you should see the other 2.
Really? I thought it was kind of cliche.
The first one is the best in my. Well, if you thought the first one was cliche, I don't know. Maybe you won't like the other 2, but the first one I think is the best. But the other 2 are good movies. I really like them.
It's got a big following. I know, that lots of people like it.
I wasn't planning on doing any episodes on John Wick, but if you want to hear us do the John Wick trilogy, let us know. We'll do some episodes on John Wick, because I love Keanu Reeves, and I'll watch the John Wick movies again. I have no problem with that.
It's funny that and I don't think I don't not enjoy watching him.
Right.
I like watching him. Especially I love The Matrix. And even the other 2 are I probably like more than most people, but Speed was good, but it's funny because watching this movie there was one moment, I don't remember what it was, but he was talking to to Bill. Obviously, I mean, he talks to Bill like 95% of the movie. But and there was just something about the way he delivered it, and I was like, he's matured so much as an actor. Like he's good.
I will agree with you on there. I think if you watch, not Bill and Ted movies, but if you watch some of his earlier films, I think you can see that he has grown definitely as an actor. But it's funny, like I think the reason that I think about people thinking Keanu Reeves is a bad actor and associating that with Bill and Ted is there's a Mad TV sketch where a guy played Keanu Reeves, and it was like the Keanu Reeves School of Acting. And the guy does a really good Keanu Reeves impression, but it's not really an impression of Keanu Reeves, it's an impression of Ted. And so that's like what he's doing in the sketch. You know, he's like, welcome to the Keanu Reeves School of Acting. You know, and it's kind of like he does like the whole, like, he's got the body movement down of Ted and everything. And it's a funny sketch, and he does, like I said, he does a good job, but it's not really an impression of Keanu Reeves, it's an impression of Ted.
Gotcha.
And so that's kind of, I think that's part of the reason why I think people associate Keanu Reeves as a bad actor because of Ted, which is kind of a shame because he's so good as Ted. Like he's actually doing a really good job.
And that's what I think is going to really, that this movie could kind of make people see that.
Yeah.
Is a lot of the people that know Keanu Reeves now is not from Bill and Ted.
Right.
It's not from The Matrix either. It's from John Wick.
Yeah, that's true.
And he's got a big fan base because of John Wick movies, especially the younger, age people. And I think if they watch Bill and Ted, it's just gonna kind of blow them away, especially if they've never seen Bill and Ted before.
Right.
About how he was able to act like that. And what really blew me away is not only can he play Ted, a character like Ted, but to be able to bring that character back from 30 years ago, the way he did.
And honestly, I think, in my opinion, he not only does it so well again, but he also plays Ted as if Ted has matured a little bit.
Yes.
It's not the same exact Ted from the 90s.
Right.
It's an older Ted. And
same with Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. They both do it.
Alex Winter does an awesome job too.
Because one of the things I thought when I first was watching it was he's not as animated. Well, at least Keanu Reeves. I felt like Keanu Reeves was not as animated as he was in the previous movies. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, how old is Keanu Reeves now? Like in his 50s, I think?
Well, actually, there's a scene in the movie that says 58-year-old Bill and Ted.
Right.
Or maybe it wasn't. It didn't say that. It might have just been. It was in the captions. Yeah. And it was 10 years later. So
he's
they're
48.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just think that 48-year-old Ted and Bill would not act like 18-year-old Bill and Ted. And so it actually, the way they played it in the movie, I actually worked really well for me. They still call each other dude and everything, which I love, but they're not the same, kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but just the same kind of animated characters they were. And so I really think they do a good job of playing Bill and Ted in their 40s.
Yes, absolutely.
So the movie opens up, and I believe it starts with, there's a voiceover with the daughters, and they're talking about, this is when you first saw Bill and Ted, and it's clips from Excellent Adventure, and then they're saying, and this is one of the things I wondered about with this film. I think when we talked about Bogus Journey, I wondered how they were going to address the fact that they seemingly played the world-changing song at the end of Bogus Journey. And in that movie, too, they also seemingly have sons, Little Bill and Little Ted, and they address that in this film, too. But I like that, even though they kind of gloss over it a little bit, that in the beginning of the movie, they talk about how they thought it was the world-changing song, and then you see like it being like the number one hit and dropping rapidly down the top 40 or whatever, and then they talk about like the band splitting up and whatnot, and And so then we see, then it starts with the wedding. You see Bill and Ted at the wedding of Missy, which that, by the way, cracked me up. The fact that Missy was now marrying Deacon.
Yes, yes. I did too. Yes. So I will go ahead and just say I really liked this movie.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
And there was a lot of funny parts. I was surprised how well it was done. And anyway, we'll get into that, but yeah, I was going to just say like that was one of the just right off the bat you go to the wedding and I'm already like laughing.
Me too. And I
Ted's younger brother.
I love the description too when like they get done with their speech and they're like Ted is his own uncle and his dad is his own son. Like that was, and it cuts to Ted's dad and he's just like shaking his head. He's like, "What?" Like that just cracked me up. I love that.
Yeah.
And then they get into their song, which by the way, I wrote the name of that song down because I thought it was amazing. And I bought the soundtrack.
When he grabs the bagpipes.
Which I love too. I love that, they obviously learned how to play these instruments, so now they're good at music, and they're struggling to come up with this song.
Well, this one, I think one of the things they were trying to show here was also kind of poking at modern music, about how kind of everything's been done.
Right.
And they're like, now people just are trying to like
stuff in there.
Just get everything in.
Yeah. So the name of the song was That Which Binds Us Through Time, the Chemical, Physical, and Biological Nature of Love, an Exploration of the Meaning of Meaning, Part 1. I love it. So I actually bought the soundtrack after having watched the movie. And the wedding song is actually, I like it. I've listened to it a couple of times. Yeah, it's just fun to listen to. I don't know why. My brother said the same thing. I don't know if he bought it or he was listening to it on Spotify or something. But he was like, "I've listened to that wedding song like twice now." It's just, I don't know.
Check it out.
It's good stuff.
It starts off sounding kind of awful.
Yeah, right. With Bill being doing the whole like whoa, whoa, whatever.
Yeah, but then I did notice it kind of started to have rhythm.
Mm-hmm. And they cut it off pretty early. Like the song on the soundtrack actually goes on for a little while, and Ted's dad unplugs the instruments, I guess, before.
Right. Which I also thought was funny that his dad was like still treating them like teenage boys.
I love it. I love it, and I love like that's where Little Bill and Little Ted come up, because so his dad comes over to them, and he's saying, he's basically calling them slackers, saying you guys have got to give this up and get real jobs and, provide for your families and whatnot. And, Bill says to him, I think, future us told us that we have to write this world-changing song. And he was like, you didn't travel through time. You didn't go to the afterlife. All of that is impossible. And then at some point he says, do you remember when you called your kids Little Bill and Little Ted, which is what they call them at the end of Bogus Journey. So they kind of retconned it a little bit by saying that these daughters were the kids that you saw at the end of right. Bill and Ted, even though in Bogus Journey it's pretty evident that they're supposed to be like their sons.
Right.
So they like I said, they retconned it a little bit, but it's fine with me. It works. They kind of ignore. I went back and watched the end of Bogus Journey again just to see that scene.
Uh-huh.
And I watched through some of the credits with newspapers and whatnot, and I think they kind of ignore a little bit of the newspapers, because one of the things in the newspaper headlines is that Missy marries the villain of the movie, Denomalos. And so they obviously get rid of that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. And then there was also like, they do talk about Death having his solo album, but then he reunites with Wild Stallions in the headlines too. And
that's right. I do remember that.
And they also talk about like peace.
By the way, Death was awesome in this movie.
Yeah, he was.
So good.
The headlines talk about peace being achieved in the Middle East because of the Wild Stallions music and stuff like that. So they kind of ignore the headline stuff. But if you kind of turn the movie off before the credits roll, then this movie can take place, and it kind of still makes sense. So yeah, so anyway, the daughters. So the what did you think of the actresses that played the daughters? Billy and
So
Theodora, or whatever her name was.
yeah, I can't remember their right. It was Billy and I don't
Something.
was it yeah. So
They might have called
I'll
her
just
Thea or something like that.
yeah, I think you're right because I'll just call her Ted's daughter.
Yeah.
I thought Ted's daughter was awesome.
Yeah.
I really liked her acting. I thought she put on Ted like great. Like I felt like when I was watching her, I was like, she had to have gone back and just studied the Bill and Ted movies because she's nailing Ted.
That's what
Now,
and that's actually one of the things that I didn't like when I was first kind of watching it, because
really?
I felt like she was just doing a Ted impression, and it didn't feel.
She was
Yeah.
definitely doing a Ted impression, but I liked it.
She does a really good job doing it, though.
She does a really good job.
So
And like I thought she was a good actress,
I do too, actually.
but Bill's daughter, I think, is kind of forgettable.
I think one of the things I liked about her was that she kind of played it like she was smarter than she was letting on. So at least that's kind of what I got from it. Like she didn't play it like a copy of Bill, like Ted's daughter did. Ted's daughter played it kind of like a copy of Ted. She did, basically a Ted impression, which was very good. And Billy, or I guess she's Billy, Bill's daughter, Thea, didn't play it exactly like Bill, which I think is okay. Because I think if both of them had done it, it would have felt even more fake to me.
Uh-huh.
And so I didn't really have a problem with her, but I agree with you in the extent that I don't know if she didn't do anything necessarily to stand out.
No, I don't think so at all. I felt like Ted's daughter, Billy.
Billy, yeah.
Yeah, Billy, I felt like actually stood out.
Right.
And I felt like she just seemed to kind of be the color of those two characters.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think Billy's the standout of the two.
And the other one's Thea?
Yeah.
So Thea, yeah.
It's a little confusing, but yeah, the blonde one is Thea, and
Yeah.
Ted's daughter is Billy. Bill's daughter's Thea. Yeah.
Thea she had some lines, but maybe I'm not remembering, but I just didn't feel like she really had anything to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess the two of them, she does come up with the idea to get Miles Davis in the band, because they originally go to see Jimi Hendrix, and Jimi Hendrix slams the door in their face, and I think it's Billy that says, he's never going to join a band with nobody he's heard of or something like that, and Thea has the idea, well, what if we go get somebody he has heard of? So, I mean, she has good ideas throughout the movie. It's also her idea to use the booth to go travel through time to collect members of the band.
Yeah. You mean Louis?
What did I say?
Miles Davis.
Oh yeah, I meant Louis Armstrong. My bad. Different trumpet player, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, Louis Armstrong. My bad. So anyway, yeah. So she has ideas. I read a negative review of the film because I went online after I finished watching it because I thought it was really good and I was curious what other people were saying about it. And some people thought that this movie was more the daughter's film than Bill and Ted, which I don't agree with.
No, not even close.
But they felt like it was too much of the daughters, and I didn't think that at all. I actually really liked the daughters almost have, it's kind of, this movie's almost like a melding of the first two movies. Because you've got the daughters who are going through time, getting certain famous characters to be part of the band, and then you've also got Bill and Ted who are dealing with death and hell and all this stuff, dealing with their other us's, if you will, and whatnot. So I don't know. I just thought it was but I never once thought like we're spending too much time with the daughters. I never had that thought while I was watching the movie.
Me neither. No,
So.
I felt like 80% of the movie was focused on Bill and Ted.
Yeah, I think so too.
What did you think of their other selves?
I laughed out loud pretty hard at all of the scenes with the other selves. The first one where they are playing like the open mic night and they run away from them.
Did you catch, I'm sure you did, the Jurassic Park reference?
No, I didn't. What was
You
didn't?
didn't?
No, what was the Jurassic Park
I
reference?
think it was Bill that said it, but he goes, "Don't look at them, they can't see you."
Oh, really? I did not notice that.
Maybe that's not, I guess is don't move. And then that would be Jurassic Park. But yeah, so my immediate thought was Jurassic Park, but maybe not.
I got you.
Yeah, I think he said don't look at them and they won't see you.
That's funny.
Yeah.
But I like them. I liked how they get into like an argument with themselves, and
That was hilarious. Yes.
I just like how the future Bills are just so bitter, basically. And Ted.
You mean Bill and Ted?
Yeah,
You call
yeah.
them future Bills.
My bad. Yeah, future selves.
Yeah, I loved how like Ted first get into it, and then Bill like pipes up, and then the other Bill's like, "Well, Bill." Their exchange in that scene, was awesome.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought it was really good. And then when they leave, I just love how they're like, "Man, future, you're like," I can't remember exactly what they say, but they basically say like, your future self is a jerk."
Yeah. And why is that? Why do you think they were jerks? Because that was very against their character. It's not like they're, evil clones or anything.
Right. I think it was, they lost everything that they held dear. Their wives left them. Their daughters wouldn't talk to them anymore. They hadn't written that life or world-changing song. And I think they had just gotten kind of bitter. And I laughed again out loud when they go back to the couples therapy and they go see their wives and they basically tell them about their future selves. They're like, "You're going to leave us." And they're like, "What? No, we're not." And they're like, "You are." And Bill says something about him drinking and she goes, "But you don't even drink."
Yeah.
And he goes, "But I will. A lot."
And I was actually going to bring that up because there's actually a problem with that. Because when they go to Dave Grohl's house, which was awesome, by the way. And you got the British Bill and Ted there.
Right.
They have a toast. And Ted
does.
drinks.
Well, yeah, that's true. I guess I didn't take it as like Ted was anti-drinking. He just didn't really ever. He just never really drank that much. But maybe it was worth a toast because they thought they were getting the world-changing song. Yeah, I didn't take it as like he was a teetotaler. Like he was didn't drink ever, but like just was not much of a drinker. That's kind of how I took it at least. But you're right. I guess that could be seen as a bit of a plot or a continuity error, perhaps maybe. The Dave Grohl thing. I started rewatching this movie tonight before we started recording. I made it about halfway through maybe, and the Dave Grohl thing, the one issue with the Dave Grohl scene I had was when Dave Grohl shows up, which was awesome. He goes, "Who are you guys?" And I feel like Bill and Ted would have been famous enough for Dave Grohl to at least know who
That's
they
a
were.
good point.
Like he should have been like,
good point.
"Bill and Ted are in my house?" Like Wild Stallions.
Because I was going to say you're right. There were articles that they showed of Wild Stallions fail again and they're trying too hard. And,
album after album and everything. And like,
so yeah, you're right. Dave Grohl should have known.
Yeah, even when they were at their top, which would have been, Bogus Journey, that was 1991. And that's when, Nirvana was like either just about to blow up or had just blown up. And so I feel like Dave Grohl would have known who the Wild Stallions were.
Yeah, definitely. You're right.
But still a funny scene though, seeing Dave Grohl show up and whatnot.
Yeah.
And
what are you guys doing in my house?
Yeah. And then they just slam the door in his face. But I love when you see the British Bill and Ted undoes like his shirt and he's got the huge gut and he's just chugging the vodka and stuff. I loved it. I thought it was so funny. And then
Yeah.
one of the best things in that scene was the buckets. They had to think about. They're like, well, we got to do something we won't remember, and so they put buckets over their heads and just stumble around. I thought that was genius. What did you think about? Okay, so while they're going through time, so backtracking a little bit, they basically go to the future, and they're told by Rufus's daughter that they've got to write this, world-changing song, and then they meet Rufus's daughter's mother. I assume it was Rufus's.
By the way,
wife.
we had a Rufus
little cameo.
Yes, which was really cool.
That was really cool. And actually, it occurred to me rewatching the beginning today. They must have found like a George Carlin impersonator or something because
to do the voice.
Yeah, because he says, this is the very first, this is the phone booth I used on my very first adventure with Bill and Ted or something like that. And I was like, I can't imagine they would have like audio clips of George Carlin saying that.
Well, I kind of foresaw this happening a long time ago about after actors die and when we start getting really good at CGI, like technically you can have actors continue to act after they're dead. And
it's been
use
a bit of
impersonators for their voices.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's been a bit of controversial lately because they did something like that with Rogue One. Grand Moff Tarkin, the guy that played Grand Moff Tarkin, he's since passed away, and they had another actor doing basically an impersonation of him, and then they just did like face replacement,
right?
Which some people said looked really bad. I actually thought it was fine.
I thought it looked terrible, pretty much. Just to pass it off as, this guy's not CGI, it just didn't work for me.
Gotcha.
You know who I would have loved to have played him was, I don't know his name, but the guy that plays Tywin Lannister in Game of Thrones. I think he would have been an awesome Grand Moff Tarkin.
I forget his name too. He was in Last Action Hero. What is his name? I'll think of it eventually. But he would have been a good choice. I agree. They did the same thing with, or maybe they didn't. Maybe they were talking about doing it with somebody else. But they've also supposedly there's going to be this movie out with James Dean, which is basically going to be the same thing where they've got CGI James Dean and somebody kind of doing the voice of James Dean. Mm-hmm. But I think it's supposed to be like a James Dean movie,
right?
And that's a little weird to me. Like, I don't mind it with movies like Star Wars or like, something where it's not the main character and you've got like the family's blessing kind of to do it and whatnot.
Right.
But like when you start saying like James Dean is going to be in a new movie, that's a little weird to me. And I feel like that's a kind of a weird slippery slope to go down.
No, I agree. But I think, depending on legal, action and lawsuits and decisions, it could be the way that things end up.
Right.
And that's going to hurt a lot of actors.
Yeah, no, it could, for sure.
Because they're just going to want to reuse actors that
have passed away.
Yeah, right. And have a fan base.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like,
but you'd have to get a good, voice impersonator, not only to sound like them, but to also be able to act.
Right. Because, assuming that somebody's, I guess you could do the whole thing CGI, but then it wouldn't look as natural. Like, motion capture definitely looks better than 100% CGI, so that way you've got, like, kind of the natural movements and whatnot. Yeah, I agree. So I don't know. I don't know how big.
But that would also be weird because let's say the person that is doing the voice of James Dean, let's say they want to do it again like 2 or 3 more times, they'd probably reuse that guy, so that guy would become
James Dean,
the artificial James Dean,
right? Which would be weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's strange to me, but anyway, so that but seeing George Carlin, seeing Rufus in holographic form at least was cool in this film, I thought. And actually, it was this was another movie where I kind of avoided the main trailer. I saw the very first trailer that came out, and I thought, I'm seeing this movie. I don't need to see any more. That type of thing. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about doing that with the Batman, by the way, because the DC Fandom trailer came out, and I was like, it looked better than I was expecting it to, and I was like, I'm sold. I'm going to see this movie. And the director said he's only shot 25 to 30% of the movie already. So, I mean, there's 75% of that movie that they still have to shoot. I was like, I don't need to see anymore. I'm sold. But I don't know. That could be hard because I don't know exactly when that movie's coming out. I know it's 2021, but it could be hard to avoid future trailers.
The footage was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Now, granted, we've talked about before how that's kind of typical nowadays is to have, they make trailers that don't necessarily always portray what the film is going to be like.
Right.
And they can make some pretty awesome trailers.
They can.
But, it looks, from what I saw, looks like if it's like that, it could be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I agree. So anyway, with this movie, I watched the first trailer. I didn't watch the second one, and I'm glad I didn't because there was some stuff that that surprised me in the film, and I'm trying to remember what was in the trailer exactly because I went back and watched the trailer later.
So there was one part that I remember after I watched the trailer, and I think it was the trailer, not the teaser, that I watched, and you told me I think you said you hadn't seen it, and I had just died laughing at that scene, and it came up again, and I remember thinking, oh, Justin saw that for the first time.
What scene was it? Do you remember?
It was Death.
Yeah.
And it was when he was playing hopscotch.
Yeah, and he was cheating.
He's playing hopscotch with himself. And he's cheating. Yeah. And they didn't have this in the trailer, but apparently he had been playing many, many games because he was like best 74 out of 80 so he kept losing
to himself, even though he was cheating. I feel like there are probably some really great subtle moments like that throughout the film that I didn't even catch the first time. You know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not. Yeah, I knew Death was in the movie. He showed up in the teaser trailer, but I don't think he even had any lines. I think it was just a shot of him. And so, yeah, seeing him play hopscotch with himself and find out that he's cheating against himself was really funny. I forgot where we had kind of left off.
I think we were talking about the daughters. We were talking about George Carlin.
Oh yeah. Because what I was saying was they go to the future and they're basically told they have 77 minutes or something to write that world-changing song, and then they decide to use the telephone booth to travel through time. And that's what I was going to say. Like, I hadn't seen the main trailer, but I'd seen the teaser, and so the telephone booth might have been in the teaser, and I just didn't remember it. But when Rufus's daughter first shows up, and she's in that weird kind of egg-looking time travel machine, I thought, oh, it's kind of. I wish they had kept stuck with the telephone booth.
Right.
I feel like it almost wouldn't have felt like a Bill and Ted movie without the telephone booth.
Right.
And so I was glad that they used the telephone booth, their original telephone booth, to go through their travels, essentially. But anyway, so once they leave to try to go to the future to find their future selves who have written the song that will unite the world and save reality, the future folks decide to send a robot after them to kill them because they think, or the great leader thinks that they never call it a prophecy, but basically like the prophecy could be misinterpreted to where the death of Bill and Ted could be what brings about the change that the world needs.
Now that's funny because we were just talking about you mentioned the and reality part, and that's one of the lines too that really got me with when they go back and talk to the wives, and Ted's wife was like, "Oh, so you're time traveling again?" And he's like, "Yeah, but it's to save reality," or like, I don't know. Anyway.
I don't remember the exact line either, but yeah, that whole scene is really good where they go back and they just like confuse their wives basically, and they're like, they go in there and go, remember, we got to make it better, not worse. And then it ends with them going, dude, we made it worse. I love it. So now that was the whole point of that. So they're at Dave Grohl's house. They have the buckets on their heads. And then the robot shows up right as they're trying to leave. And the robot accidentally kills Ted's dad.
Right.
what did you think of the robot character?
I liked him.
I did too. At first, it was one of those things where at first I didn't really have like an opinion of him.
Dennis, what's his middle name?
I don't remember.
It starts with a C.
Yeah.
McCoy.
Caleb. Dennis
Caleb
McCoy.
McCoy. Yeah, he had some good stuff going for him.
He did, and like I said, at first he was just like a regular kind of evil robot. But the first time we see a hint of Dennis, I think, is after he kills Ted's dad, and he's like holding his arm gun out.
Yeah,
and he just kind of like looks left to right, like, oops. and then later on, when he kills like everybody, he goes, "Oh no!"
Yeah.
and my brother, when I was watching it with my brother, he was like, "Is that Will Ferrell?" Because the guy that like that moment, the guy that plays the robot did kind of have like a Will Ferrell vibe with the way he.
Who plays him?
I forget the actor's name, but it's the guy that we originally thought might have been like. One of the past episodes we did about Bill and Ted, we talked about death, and we thought this guy might have been playing like a young Death or something because he's a bald actor. His name is Anthony Kerrigan. He was on. I remember him from Gotham. He played Victor Zsasz on Gotham, which I didn't watch all of Gotham. I've only seen a handful of episodes from the first season. But he played Victor Zsasz on Gotham, and he was also on The Flash, and he was on Barry, which was an HBO show. Looks like that, if you can kind of see it.
Yeah, he definitely. I can see why we were thinking Death.
Yeah, he kind of looks like a young William Sadler.
Yeah.
But I thought he did a really good job, and then when like the personality kind of comes out, it was funny. I liked it, especially. Yeah. I liked how they treated him too. Like he's basically just like a little kid that's kind of like, hovering around them, kind of annoying them. They're
right.
Like,
Like to me, like part of me got this vibe of it felt a little forced and more modern humor. Like they were trying to bring some more modern humor in.
Right.
But even though I got that vibe, I still thought it was pretty funny.
Me too, and I had that vibe too. I will be honest, like especially I think it might have been like right after they die. He kind of maybe it's like around the time where he first introduces himself as Dennis.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, I kind of felt like I knew what they were doing.
Yeah,
and I was like, I don't know if I totally like it, but the more they kind of played on it,
right,
and everything, and you see him like dancing and stuff, I was like, all right, this is actually pretty good. I like Dennis.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of the same with like the daughter, Billy, I guess, doing like the Ted impression. How I was like, I don't know if I totally love it, but then it grew on me. I think it worked. I think Dennis Caleb McCoy worked really well.
Yeah.
What did you think about Bill and Ted? The prison Bill and Ted. I guess it would have been. That was the 10 years later, right? That was 2030.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
So they were 58 there. The exchange that they had with Dennis, I think, was my favorite. when they beat him up, and then they start to go back after Bill and Ted, and he goes, "It's not a real song." And they both turn back around like, "No, you didn't."
Yeah,
and just start beating him up some more. I got a big kick out of that.
I laugh like every time I think Bill and Ted both once each say, "Is it a song?" And they're both like, "Yes." That cracked me up. And I actually thought like it's obviously they're wearing like muscle suits.
Yeah.
And I think Bill's doesn't look quite as good as Ted's, but like they
Ted
both look pretty good.
Yes, he exactly. Like they look ripped.
They do.
And Ted looks ripped like beyond what is possible.
Right.
But it looks real.
Right, I agree. Like those are actually impressive.
Yeah.
Like prosthetics.
Yeah.
I
wonder if in 20 years we go back and watch it and we're like,
"Oh my god, that looked terrible."
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Who knows? I don't know. But yeah, I thought that scene was fantastic as well. I guess let's talk about Billy and Thea and their adventure. What did you think about them going back and getting Louis Armstrong and Jimi Hendrix and Mozart.
Mozart was I was really excited to see Jimi Hendrix.
Mm-hmm.
And then they did, and you know, Louis Armstrong, and then Mozart. Like, I was like, Mozart's awesome. But then, yeah, I didn't know who the flute playing lady was.
Right, or the drummer, and think
the drummer was like, I think someone they just made up.
Yeah, I think so too. And
like, was like, there wouldn't have been I can't imagine there would be a famous drummer from what was it? Cave? Was it like Caveman?
Like Caveman times. Yeah. No, I agree, and I think that's. I guess they were trying to get somebody from like different time. They didn't want to get Jimi Hendrix and somebody else from like the 60s or 70s.
Right.
But I think it would have been better, honestly. I think, you know, I really liked Mozart, Louis Armstrong, and Jimi Hendrix.
Right.
And then the other two, I just felt like were kind of a missed opportunity.
I agree.
The woman, the Chinese like flute player.
Yeah.
She was cool. I didn't mind that. But the drummer from the Caveman times, I just thought was just not the best choice.
Yeah, I agree totally.
I think it would have been better if they had just gotten, you know, John Bonham from Led Zeppelin or something, you know, something like a famous, or Dave Grohl even. If they had gotten Dave Grohl, I think that would have been cool.
Yeah, and also, like, I don't know who this new guy is. What's his name? Kid
Cudi.
Yeah, I've never.
He's more modern. He's like from now,
and I get that. And you know, and rock potentially you could say is currently dead right now. So
right.
You know, that's fine. But yeah, Dave Grohl would have been awesome.
Yeah, I think that would have been a better choice actually than the cave person. But that's the only thing I didn't like really, I guess, about the daughters time traveling was just them getting. I just feel like it was a little bit of a missed opportunity. Maybe they had maybe the writers had an idea for a better drummer or a better or whatever, or maybe a couple other famous musicians, but maybe they couldn't get like the, you know, I assume you have to get permission from like Jimi Hendrix's estate or something. I don't know.
There's a lot of choices.
There's a ton of choices.
A lot of choices.
And Dave Grohl was in the movie, so I feel like you could have gotten Dave Grohl, and I feel like he would have been okay with it.
But then again, he did have Bill and Ted arrested.
That's true.
For a minimum of 5 years because they were still in prison.
Yeah, that's true.
From that incident, which I thought was pretty funny. They're like still in jail for being in Dave Grohl's house 5 years later. Yep,
I agree. Yeah, so you're right, maybe, but I don't know. I thought that was one area that they could have done a little bit better. And then so I think once they get all the band members, they show up back in 2020, and that's when the robot ends up accidentally killing all of them.
Yes.
And sending them to hell.
Right.
Now this is a little bit of a continuity error, but I don't really I don't know if it would be a continuity error. But it's one thing that is interesting to me, I guess you could say, is Ted's dad was murdered by the robot in 2025. And everybody else was murdered in 2020, and yet they're in hell at the same time. But I take it as time in the afterlife is a lot different.
Yeah.
And so
I would
it's okay. Like it's not like something that I'm like, that doesn't make sense because it's the afterlife. So who knows how time works in the afterlife.
Right.
So that's okay with me. But that was something I saw brought up online. Like they were like, Ted's dad was killed in the future and they were killed in the present. But
I didn't even think of that. But yeah, I agree with you. Like time wouldn't really be relevant at that point.
This is also interesting because this movie I think is interesting because in the first two movies, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but in the first two movies, it was all just time travel. There wasn't really anything so much about alternate realities and things like that.
Right.
Where there is a little bit of that in this movie because like the Joanna and Elizabeth supposedly are taking to alternate realities to try to find a life where they are happy with Bill and Ted and they can't find it.
Right. Yeah, this goes more of like the Bruce Banner style, like time travel.
Endgame time travel. Right. Yeah, because that's the other thing. It's like their song, they have to play their song, by 7:17 p.m. on whatever day it is in 2020. Otherwise, all time will unravel. And yet they're visiting their future selves, and they're going to the future. And so it's like time, as we think of it linearly, that's not how it's really working in this movie. It's like time is existing all at once, past, present, and the future.
Right.
It's all going on at the same time, and it's all going to collapse at this one moment that happens to be at 7:17 p.m. in 2020.
Right.
But
I feel
that's
like
not something they really did in the first couple.
Yeah, I was going to say the first movie. Well, they don't really time travel in the second one. Well, they go to
They do at the end at least, because they go learn their guitar. They learn how to play guitar, and then they come back to battle the bands to play their song.
That's right. Okay.
And I think they might. I don't remember if they time travel before that or not, but I know they.
I think they do in the beginning, because is that the one that? Oh, what? Who was in them? There was a famous artist in one of either the first or second one. I don't remember who it was. He was like, you know what I'm talking about?
I don't totally remember, but I think it might have been the second one.
Okay. Well,
because in the first one it was all like historical figures. It wasn't. I don't think there were any famous musicians in the first movie.
Right. And Rufus technically goes back at the beginning of the second movie, doesn't he?
Denamolo sends back the evil robots, and Rufus like throws a guitar onto the phone booth.
That's
and,
right. Yeah.
Gets pulled into the.
Okay, so there is a little bit of time travel.
Yeah.
But in the first one, especially, it's more of the Back to the Future
type time travel.
Yeah, of everything that happens affects everything.
The future.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas it seems like in this movie, the future us's are all alternate reality versions of Bill and Ted. It's the Back to the Future Part 2, 1985 with the Biff casino and all that. It's the what if version, if something. So either way, I thought it was like it's a little confusing to think about with the whole idea of like time all happening at once, and if they don't do the song by 7:17 p.m. in 2020, then the future will collapse and everything. But at the same time, I think it really works.
Yeah, I agree.
And I like that there's like that ticking clock, which is something that adds tension to films and stuff. When you've got kind of this deadline. And I guess since we're kind of
an old school deadline, or an old school concept that you don't really see that much anymore. I don't think.
Right.
Maybe I just don't watch a lot of movies. But I feel like we've only got this amount of time and the clock's ticking has kind of gone away when they really kind of almost overused it back in the 90s. And
right. But it works for this movie, I thought, really well.
Yes, agreed.
So I guess I don't want to skip over this. So let's talk about when they convince the robot to kill them. Well, I guess first they go even farther in the future and they see 90-year-old Bill and Ted. Right. And the makeup, and I'm assuming, I don't know for sure, but I assume that's half makeup, half CG. Mm-hmm. It could have been all makeup. I don't know, but it looked really good.
Yeah, I agree.
And I thought that while watching the movie, I was like, old age makeup has come a long way. Because old age makeup back in the day, you could always tell it was a young actor in old age makeup. And they both looked really good as the old versions of themselves. But they supposedly give them the song on a flash drive.
Right.
And then when they find out that their kids and everybody have been killed, they convince Dennis to kill them.
No, he doesn't. He tries to.
He doesn't. He wants to, but he can't.
And then he kills himself from guilt.
That's right. And they like jump in on that basically. Yes. Yeah. That's right. That's great.
And I love how he used the classic line, "Goodbye, cruel world."
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
The one thing I kind of wish they had done for this movie, they kind of did it, but I wish they had done it a little bit more closely, or I wish they had resembled a little more what they did in Bogus Journey, is that the falling. Like you see when Ted's dad gets killed, you see him falling and the SWAT van falling, and that's the first time you see death. You see like him pointing at Ted's dad or whatever. But in Bogus Journey, it was this completely pitch black dark fall. Like you couldn't see anything, and they were falling for a really long time. That's when they played 20 questions and everything, if you remember that. And then eventually they kind of land. And I wish they had done that again in this movie. I wish we had seen like that really long fall of them.
Oh, the 20 questions was in Bogus Journey?
Yeah, yeah. When they're like falling for a really long time, and then they get bored of falling, and they start asking themselves 20 questions.
I don't remember that. That's hilarious.
Oh, yeah. So it was cool that we got to see the fall, but it didn't last as long, obviously, as it did in Bogus Journey, and you could see the kind of surroundings in this movie, whereas you couldn't see it in Bogus Journey. What did you think about the hell scenes?
I liked it.
Yeah, I did too.
I liked the scenery. You know, you had the flying like demons and even the demons that they asked. What was it they asked? Oh, about the girls, I guess, the daughters.
Yeah.
And then one of them said something when they were walking away that I thought was funny. I can't remember what it was.
I don't remember either. I know they said something about the robot. I know they said something about Dennis. I think they were like, "Yep, that's a robot in hell."
Oh yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Well, it didn't occur to me while I was watching it, but it was once the movie was over, I thought, the writers didn't have a cameo in this movie, because the writers play in the first movie. They are waiters at the Ziggy Piggy restaurant with Napoleon. And then in the second movie, they're doing the seance with Missy. They're there at the seance. And I was like, oh, the writers didn't put themselves in this one. But they did. They're the demons. The two demons are the writers of the film, which I thought was actually pretty good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, I liked those. I liked the design of hell, and I thought it looked pretty good. And then I loved seeing Death. And I like Death's house, I guess, in hell. I thought that was like, it had like a pretty cool design too. I
like how he was demoted.
Yes.
Yeah, everything about Death was awesome. Like I was so happy with Death.
Me too, and I was so thankful that they were able to get William Sadler to come back and do it, and that they were able to include him in the movie and everything. It was so great. So yeah, I really liked Death. I love this scene. I liked how he was like, "What are you back here to sue me again?" And they're like, "We didn't want to sue you." Like, that whole exchange with Death was just,
he was so
fantastic.
bitter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And apparently he had reason to be.
But at the same time, they apparently, I guess, based on their conversation, Death tried to take the Wild Stallion's name, which is why they had to sue him.
Right.
But he was doing 40-minute bass solos.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, his comment about, after I left, that's when you guys started going downhill because they didn't have the 40-minute bass solos.
I love it. It's so funny to me.
And then so when he went solo, he was just only did bass.
Yeah, that cracked me up too. I think one of the daughters talked to him, and they're like the world just wasn't ready for an all bass album. Oh, it was so good.
Yeah.
So I guess they pretty much convinced Death to let him come back up. And that's pretty much the end of that's not the end of the movie, but that takes us into the big scene with the MP46, which ends up being a spot on the highway, a highway marker.
Right.
It was very convenient that there was a Guitar Center truck stuck in traffic there with all the equipment that they needed, but I was cool with it. It worked. I was able to roll with that. And I got to tell you, one of my favorite moments in the movie, and it's one of the things I love about Bill and Ted, and I think we talked about this in one of the other episodes, is I just love how kind-hearted Bill and Ted are.
Yeah.
And how they just have such big hearts, and they really don't have much. They don't really have egos necessarily, because when they find out at the end of this movie that it's not them who write the world-changing song, it's their daughters, and the daughters don't necessarily write it, but they're the ones that it's their song essentially. they have
Right, they're kind of the conductors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Because
but
you have Jimi Hendrix and Mozart
and they're directing them.
right.
They're kind of telling them what how to play it or whatever.
Right.
But they're not like necessarily writing the music.
Right.
So yeah, conductor is a good way to put it. They're directing the music. But anyway, when Bill and Ted find out that it's not them and it's their daughters, there's not even like a hint of them being like, oh, it's not us.
Right.
They just immediately are like, it's you guys. And they even say, you're not here to back us. We're here to back you. And it's so like endearing to me that they are just so, it's not even like a thought to them to be like, no, this has to be us.
Right.
They just are immediately fine with taking a step back and letting them take it and getting all the glory, if you will. You know what I mean? It's one of the things I love about Bill and Ted. I think in one of the other movies, I think one of the things I mentioned was that I liked about Bill and Ted was, I think it was after they died, they needed to check like on the princesses, and even though they were dead.
Oh yeah, you're right.
He's like, we got to try. You
right.
know, it was like they were caring so much about the other people, they didn't even, the fact that they had just died wasn't even a factor to them. Like Bill and Ted have such big hearts, and I just love that about them.
Yeah, they do. Except for future Bill and Ted.
Right, yeah, that's true. That is true. Future Bill and Ted are a bunch of jerks, but current Bill and Ted, they're cool guys.
So,
what do you think about the song that they play?
Well, I was going to say they kind of did write it.
Right.
Because I mean, yes, you have the other contributors, but their part, like, didn't that just kind of come off? That was kind of improv, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was probably. They were just kind of going with it.
Yeah, and that
coming
was
up with it on the fly.
Technically, it appeared to me
the
like
moment.
Yeah, the moment of the song. So they were the biggest influence on the song.
Which is saying something when you got a band with Louis Armstrong and Jimi Hendrix and Mozart.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
But that reminds me, that's one of the things another thing I really liked about the movie was that it's not just them playing a song, like them uniting the world.
Right.
What they did in this was like they gave everybody instruments and everybody was actually playing on the song.
Right.
And I thought that was actually kind of cool the way they did that, the way that was the way the world united.
Right. It wasn't what you
It
played.
wasn't a performance. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
It was how.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. I was just going to say that, overall, I was really impressed with the movie. Like, it's a good movie and definitely a fantastic third Bill and Ted movie. It just fits in there so perfectly.
Absolutely. I agree. And I'm really glad that you liked it because I was nervous that I was going to love it and you were going to be like, it was okay. Or something.
It felt like a Bill and Ted movie. Like, it didn't feel like, a reboot or hey, let's make a sequel 20 years later. It was literally, It felt like it just fits so well.
There's always the danger of doing a sequel so far after.
Oh, yeah. It's hard to do.
Last movie. Absolutely. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I feel like most often it doesn't.
Right, I agree.
But this time it worked.
Yeah,
it worked
and
really well.
and I would I'd give all the credit to who are the writers?
Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson.
Yeah, I'd give them and Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter the credit because if they couldn't connect to what Bill and Ted was when the original movies and bring that back, then it wouldn't have worked. But they did. Like all four of them really were able to just make a Bill and Ted movie again.
I agree. And the director, I think, did a great job, too. But I agree with you in terms of where it's a good movie, so you got to give credit to the director. But if it had been written by two guys that were not Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon, who wrote the first two, I don't think it would have had that same kind of magic. I don't think it would have worked as well. And obviously, you can't have Bill and Ted without Keanu Reeves or Alex Winter. So if one of them had not been able to come back or something, it just wouldn't have.
Right, or just not been able to bring back the character vibe.
Right.
But,
yeah, exactly.
But they did. Mm-hmm. And I'm not discrediting the director at all. Like it was, it was well directed. Like So
That director, by the way, directed Galaxy Quest. Did you ever see that?
I've seen part of it, but I didn't get to finish it. I don't remember why.
You should give it another go because now that, especially because I don't know when you watched it before, but it is essentially a Star Trek parody, and it's fantastic. It's really, really good.
Definitely want to watch it.
Yeah. So, what would you rate Bill and Ted Face the Music?
I'll give it 4 out of 5 stars.
That's exactly what I'm going to give it. 4 out of 5. I mean, talking about it, it almost made me want to give it 4.5. But
that's what I was just debating. But yeah, I'm gonna stick with 4.
I'm gonna stick with 4 too. I think it is really good. Out of the 3, I think it's number 3. And if I had to like put them in order from best to worst, it's not bad by any means.
Right.
But I think, and the only reason I think it kind of goes in the 3rd spot is just because, number one, it's so new. I've only really seen it once. But also, the first 2 just have that nostalgia factor.
Right.
It's, I've had those movies in my life for 30 years, so I've loved those movies. And this one is fantastic, but it's new. It's too, like, I have a hard time putting it above Bogus Journey or something because, but yeah, I think it's amazing. And I agree with you. I think it is a great 3rd Bill and Ted movie. It's not like spoiler alert for my feelings on the Terminator franchise. It's not like Terminator 3 where I like don't consider it part of the movie, part of the series at all.
Which is funny to think about because when did Terminator 3 come out?
That's a great question. I think it was like 2004 or 2005? No, 2003 maybe?
Yeah, so let's say it was 2003. That was only 12 years
after the second one?
Which is a long time, but this was
30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2003 was Terminator 3. Yeah. Well, we'd love to know what you think about Bill and Ted Face the Music. You can always let us know at www.cinemaheroes.com. You can leave us a comment on our Facebook, facebook.com/SM and SM podcast. You can always leave a comment on this video, of course. And if you're watching this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel. We'd love it. We'd appreciate it. And you can always tweet at us, of course, on Twitter at Cinema Heroes. We're also on Instagram at Cinema Heroes as well. So you can always comment on that page as well. I think that about wraps it up for this episode, though. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzel.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Party on, dudes. I love Bill and Ted.